It was a bitterly cold evening in Brooklyn, the kind where the wind slices through your coat no matter how tightly you wrap it. Streetlights flickered over cracked sidewalks, and the familiar hum of the city seemed subdued, as if holding its breath. On the fifth floor of a pre-war brick apartment building on Myrtle Avenue, 27-year-old Lena Marsh locked her door for what would be the last time. She had just finished a long shift, working remotely on a freelance graphic design project. Her cat, Marble, meowed from inside as she turned the deadbolt. A neighbor across the hall, Mrs. Larkins, briefly looked up from her mail and smiled. Lena nodded in return, gave a small, tired smile and walked down the hallway. That was the last confirmed sighting of her. She never showed up to her next client call, never replied to emails, didn't feed Marble. Within 48 hours, her friends started to worry. Her sister, Naomi, flew in from Philadelphia. When they opened the apartment with a copy of her key, everything was untouched. Her phone lay charging on the nightstand. Her purse sat on the counter, unopened. Her winter coat was still on the hook by the door. Marble, hungry but otherwise fine, was curled up on the bed. There were no signs of forced entry, no indication of struggle. It was as if Lena had vanished between locking the door and stepping into the hallway. The police found nothing. Security footage captured her locking the apartment and walking out of frame at 7:47 p.m., but the next hallway camera had mysteriously malfunctioned that evening. Officers chalked it up to a fluke. No leads, no suspects, no body. Years passed. Tenants moved in and out of apartment 5B. Some said it felt cold, even when the radiators clanged with heat. Others complained of strange drafts, unexplained creaks, or a sense of being watched. Marble was adopted by Naomi. Lena's case went cold, labeled a voluntary disappearance by a department that couldn't afford to waste more resources. For 13 years, Lena Marsh became a name frozen in time, buried in old case files and the back of her sister's mind. Until a month ago. The building had recently been bought by a property management company eager to modernize the old units. The new tenants of 5B, a young couple named Mia and Jay, decided to renovate the closet in the main bedroom. The back panel was warped and the drywall cracked easily as Jay pried it away. Behind it, nestled between wooden beams, was a small folded piece of paper sealed inside a yellowing plastic sleeve. It wasn't dusty. It looked almost intentionally placed. Waiting. Jay pulled it free and unfolded it. The paper was brittle, the ink smudged with age. The message was handwritten, only a few lines. If you find this, it means they got in. Do not trust the building. Please tell Naomi I didn't leave. The handwriting matched samples from Lena's journal entries, which Naomi had kept. Forensics confirmed the paper dated back at least a decade. The closet wall had been patched over during a previous renovation, suggesting the note had been hidden long before. Suddenly, after 13 years of silence, Lena's voice echoed out from behind the walls. And this was just the beginning. Before we unravel what really happened to Lena Marsh, take a second to subscribe to the channel. We uncover real-life mysteries, forgotten disappearances, and chilling discoveries that could change how you see the world around you. You won't want to miss what comes next, because this case is far from over. The note was just the first clue. Lena Marsh wasn't someone who easily stood out in a crowd. That's not to say she lacked presence. There was a quiet depth to her, a stillness that lingered long after she'd left a room. People who met her remembered her soft voice, her intense gaze, the way she always seemed to be listening, really listening, even when she said very little. In the heart of Brooklyn's ever-turning chaos, Lena lived a life that was deliberately slow, self-contained, and oddly poetic. She worked from home as a freelance graphic designer, specializing in intricate, minimalist book covers. Her work was well regarded in niche publishing circles. She rarely attended meetings in person. Most of her communication came through emails and brief Zoom calls, where she kept her camera off. Clients described her as brilliant but distant. She never missed a deadline, never asked for extensions. Always professional, always precise. Her apartment on Myrtle Avenue was modest, filled with books, plants, and sketch pads. She had a habit of labeling things, drawers, containers, even her tea jars, with handwritten notes in careful cursive. Her only companion was Marble, a rescue cat she'd adopted 2 years before her disappearance. Marble followed her from room to room, as if guarding something unseen. Lena's social life was minimal but not non-existent. She had a few close friends, Joe, a fellow designer who lived in Queens, and Marcus, a former classmate from Pratt Institute who often checked in on her. According to them, Lena had changed in the months leading up to her disappearance. She'd grown more withdrawn. She avoided long conversations. She cancelled dinner plans. At one point, she asked Joe if she could borrow a hammer and duct tape. Not unusual. But when Joe asked why, Lena simply said, "It's for the walls." She didn't elaborate. More tellingly, Lena had become obsessed with an old leather-bound journal she carried everywhere. Naomi, her sister, would later describe it as almost sacred to her. Lena refused to let anyone read it. When Naomi once tried to flip through it while Lena was in the bathroom, Lena came back, snatched it from her hands, and didn't speak to her for a week. Lena had never been diagnosed with any mental health condition, but Naomi always suspected something dark had followed her out of childhood. The Marsh sisters had grown up in the foster care system after their parents died in a car crash when Lena was 10 and Naomi was 8. The system bounced them between homes. In one of them, Lena had stopped speaking entirely for nearly a year. Therapy helped, but she never fully opened up about what had happened during that silent period. Even into adulthood, Lena avoided speaking about those years. The only time she ever alluded to them was during a late-night phone call with Naomi, 3 months before she vanished. Her voice was thin, almost fragile. "Do you ever feel like someone is still watching?" she asked. "Watching who?" "I don't know, like not someone specific, just eyes. In the walls or behind things." "In dreams?" Naomi chalked it up to stress, perhaps isolation. But now she regrets brushing it off. Lena's apartment habits also changed. She started locking every window, even during heat waves. She kept curtains drawn at all times. She taped over her laptop camera and refused to use her phone's voice assistant. Marcus once joked that she was turning into a conspiracy theorist. Lena hadn't laughed. One particularly strange memory came from Mrs. Larkins, the elderly neighbor across the hall. She remembered hearing Lena pacing late at night, always in the same pattern, always stopping near the closet wall, then starting again. Once she heard a thud, like something heavy had fallen. But when she asked Lena about it the next morning, Lena just smiled and said, "Just moving things around." It wasn't just paranoia. There were patterns in Lena's routines, subtle but precise. She watered her plants at the same hour every day, wrote in her journal by candlelight, and often sat on the floor near the radiator, sketching silently for hours. Whatever Lena feared, it wasn't random. It was calculated. It had rules, boundaries, triggers, and the last few pages of her life were written in code no one understood, until that note appeared behind the closet wall. The day Lena Marsh disappeared began like any other. March 4th, 2011, a Friday. Chilly, overcast and uneventful, Lena submitted 2 client projects that morning, responded to 3 emails, and ordered groceries online. At 4:12 p.m., she texted her sister Naomi a short message. "Still cold here. Wish spring would hurry up." That was the last text she ever sent. Her neighbor, Mrs. Larkins, said Lena stepped out briefly around 7:30 p.m. to drop a small trash bag in the chute. She wore sweatpants, a navy hoodie and slippers. She smiled politely as always and said, "Have a good night." At 7:47 p.m., building security footage showed her locking her apartment door. She turned the key, tugged the handle twice, checked the knob, and walked down the hall. After that, she vanished. The next hallway camera, placed near the stairwell, had been working perfectly for weeks, but that night, its feed cut out at 7:45 p.m. and didn't resume until midnight. The building manager blamed a power hiccup, though nothing else was affected. No other cameras were down. The timing couldn't have been more precise. When Lena failed to show up for a video meeting the next morning, her editor emailed her twice, no response. Marcus called her cell that afternoon. It went straight to voicemail. Naomi, growing concerned, drove up that evening. She knocked, called out, even tried the buzzer. Nothing. Lena's apartment door was locked from the outside. No signs of struggle, no strange smells, no noise. Naomi contacted the building manager, who let her in with a master key. What she found didn't look like a crime scene, it looked paused. A cup of chamomile tea had cooled on the kitchen counter. Lena's laptop was still open to a design program, a half-completed book cover glowing faintly. Her phone, fully charged, was plugged in on her nightstand. Her wallet was on the dresser, untouched. Her coat and shoes were still by the door. Marble was sitting beside the bedroom window, tail flicking with agitation, but Lena was gone. Police arrived within the hour. They interviewed neighbors, searched the building, questioned friends and family, but nothing was out of place. No fingerprints that didn't belong, no signs of forced entry, no blood, no hair, no fibers, just Lena's absence, and one strange detail. In her bedroom trash bin, among discarded tissues and receipts, they found a torn scrap of paper that didn't match anything else. It was roughly ripped from a notebook and contained only a single line, scrawled hastily, "If I'm not back by tomorrow, it's already too late." That sentence shifted the tone of the entire investigation. At first, detectives considered voluntary disappearance. Maybe she cracked under pressure, decided to run. Maybe she had a mental break. But her accounts were untouched. No money withdrawn, no purchases made. Her passport remained in her filing cabinet. And Lena Marsh wasn't the type to do anything impulsively. Her sister was adamant. Lena would never just leave. Theories swirled. Maybe she'd been kidnapped by someone in the building. Maybe she'd slipped into a dissociative state and wandered off. Maybe she had secrets no one knew. But where was the evidence? No one had seen her exit the building. No one reported hearing anything strange. The stairwells were quiet. The elevators ran without incident. The main entrance camera showed no one matching Lena's appearance, coming or going, between 7:47 p.m. and the following morning. Detective Peter Sloan, who took the case, kept returning to the closet. Something about it bothered him. It was deeper than usual, oddly structured, with seams in the back panel that looked newer than the rest. He noted it, but without probable cause or signs of tampering, he couldn't justify tearing it open. For the first 2 weeks, Lena's image circulated widely. Flyers, news spots, social media campaigns. People searched parks, alleyways, hospitals. A psychic even offered to help. Nothing surfaced. Eventually, the case went cold. All that remained was a locked apartment full of silence, a sister's broken hope, and a sentence that refused to fade. "If I'm not back by tomorrow, it's already too late." Detective Peter Sloan wasn't known for emotion. After 3 decades in the NYPD, he'd seen too many lost girls, too many empty rooms. But something about Lena Marsh's disappearance pulled at him. The apartment was too still, the note too haunting. And Lena's life, so ordered, so methodical, didn't fit the pattern of someone ready to vanish. He made her case personal. In the early weeks, Sloan pursued every angle. He reviewed surveillance from surrounding blocks, hoping to catch Lena outside the building. Nothing. He interviewed delivery drivers, doormen, former tenants, even maintenance workers who hadn't stepped foot in 5B for months. He traced every call from her cell, searched her devices for hidden accounts, and pored over emails for signs of distress. The results were maddening. No threats. No stalkers, no debts, no sudden purchases, just silence. Every theory seemed to collapse under its own weight. Was it a kidnapping? There was no sign of forced entry. No one heard screams. And Lena wasn't the type to open the door for a stranger, not after the way she'd been acting. A secret lover, none of her friends mentioned one. Her phone held no flirtatious messages, no romantic plans, no dates on the calendar. She hadn't been seen with anyone suspicious. Mental health break? Possibly. But it didn't feel right. People who flee reality usually leave some trace, a direction, a farewell, a credit card swipe. Lena left nothing but that note, a cult. That theory gained traction online. Some believed Lena's journal obsession pointed to esoteric beliefs. but no evidence of any group was found. No symbols, no affiliations, no digital breadcrumbs. Then there was the man in the green coat. 3 separate tenants had reported seeing a tall man in a faded green trench lingering outside the building during the winter of 2010 into early 2011. He never entered, never spoke. Just stood near the alley gate, staring at the 5th-floor fire escape. Once he was seen sketching something in a notebook. Another time, he stood under the street lamp in the rain for over an hour, unmoving. Sloan had the composite sketch drawn from the descriptions. But no one recognized the man. No fingerprints, no ID. The footage from outside the building's main entrance never showed him. It was as if he lived in the shadows between frames. Still, Sloan followed every lead. He ran the sketch through every available database, local, state, federal. Came up empty. He interviewed dozens of parolees and vagrants in the area. Nothing. The man in the green coat faded into rumor, and the theory lost momentum. What troubled Sloan most, though, was the closet. He couldn't stop thinking about it. The shallow creak when he stepped too close, the oddly cool air that leaked through the back. He'd requested a structural inspection, but it was denied. No cause, no probable reason. Without proof of a crime, his hands were tied. So he looked elsewhere. One angle stood out, the building's former superintendent, Larry Jenkins. Jenkins had worked there for over a decade and quit just 4 months before Lena vanished. A simple resignation on paper, but Sloan was suspicious. Jenkins had a record, 2 sealed arrests in the 90s, including one for unlawful surveillance. Though the charges never stuck, it raised questions. Sloan tried to track Jenkins down. He'd moved to Florida, changed his phone, gone off the grid. Still, Sloan left messages. He kept a copy of the file marked, "Open further contact required." As the months passed, the case lost visibility. New cases pushed it down the stack. Sloan was reassigned. Naomi kept calling, hoping for updates. Sloan gave what little he had, but eventually he had to admit the truth. They were stuck. Yet even in retirement, he never really let it go. Lena's face stayed on his fridge. Her note lived in his drawer. And he kept the sketch of the man in the green coat folded in his wallet. Because something about the way she disappeared, the precision, the silence, the dread, told him it wasn't over. After Lena's disappearance, apartment 5B sat vacant for several months. Naomi had insisted the building management leave it untouched while the investigation unfolded, but once the case went cold, it quietly returned to the market. The rent was slightly lowered. The listing didn't mention the unresolved mystery. The first new tenant was a graduate student named Eric Chung. He moved in during the fall of 2011, drawn by the price and proximity to Pratt. He stayed for less than 6 months. In a voicemail to a friend, he said, "The place is fine, but I swear there's something off about it. I keep hearing things, like movement behind the walls." When asked for clarification, Eric laughed it off. He claimed it was probably pipes or squirrels, but he broke his lease early and moved to a smaller unit 2 blocks away. Next came a couple, Thomas and Maribel Reyes, who moved in just before the holidays in 2012. They brought in bright colors, hung artwork, and filled the space with music and laughter. But within 3 months, they began to argue. Thomas complained of insomnia. Maribel had vivid nightmares. She told her sister in an email, "It's like someone's in the apartment when we sleep. I wake up and think I see a woman standing near the closet, just watching." They broke up the following spring. Maribel left first. Thomas remained alone for another month before subletting to a friend. This pattern continued. Over the next decade, at least 7 different tenants occupied 5B. None stayed more than a year. Some cited rising rent or job relocations. Others were less clear. One woman said she left because she felt cold all the time. Another claimed the walls made a ticking noise that stopped the moment she looked directly at them. Most complaints centered around the closet. Drafts seeped through even in the summer. Items left on the top shelf were often found on the floor without explanation. A bottle of perfume once shattered inside a closed box. One man said his cat refused to enter the bedroom at all. Maintenance workers noted the odd construction, plaster that cracked too easily, screws that came loose without force. One even joked the closet was haunted, though no one laughed. In 2019, a family with a young daughter named Ivy moved in. It was the first time a child had lived in 5B since Lena. At first, everything seemed normal. Ivy was quiet, artistic, prone to long silences but otherwise healthy. Then she began drawing. At first the sketches were harmless, trees, stars, cats. But then Ivy started drawing a woman, always the same, thin, long, dark hair standing near a closet. Sometimes the woman was smiling. Other times her mouth was sewn shut. Ivy never gave her a name. Her parents asked who it was. "She's stuck," Ivy said. "She wants out." One drawing in particular alarmed them. It showed the woman pressing her palms against the inside of a wall. Red ink smeared her fingers. Behind her, a dark shape loomed, featureless, hunched, with long arms that stretched toward her. Ivy called it the Watcher. After Ivy began waking up screaming, they broke the lease. The building manager still refused to acknowledge any pattern. He blamed urban stress, overactive imaginations, and cheap insulation. Officially, the apartment was no different from any other. But unofficially, word began to spread. Tenants warned each other. Superstitions formed. Avoid 5B. Don't touch the back wall of the closet. Don't leave the bedroom window open after midnight. And yet, the building remained full. In a city as expensive and unforgiving as New York, people take what they can get. In early 2024, Mia and Jay, a couple new to the city, found the listing. They were drawn to the charm, the arched doorways, the hardwood floors, the vintage tile in the kitchen. They signed the lease within a week, excited to make it their first shared home. They were the ones who decided to renovate. Mia and Jay weren't superstitious. They didn't believe in ghosts or urban legends. To them, apartment 5B was just a well-priced find in a city that offered few. They planned to renovate it themselves. Fresh paint, new lighting, updated closet shelving. It was a weekend project, something to make the space truly theirs. The closet in the main bedroom was deeper than expected. Jay noticed it while measuring for shelves. As he tapped the back wall, the sound changed, hollow, like there was space behind it. Curious, he pressed harder, and a hairline crack along the panel's edge widened. A slight push, and the panel shifted inward, revealing a narrow cavity filled with dust, cobwebs, and something else. A plastic sleeve, yellowed with time, tucked between two studs. Inside it was a single piece of lined paper, folded 3 times, corners curled. Jay handed it to Mia. She opened it slowly, half expecting nothing, but what she read stopped her breath. "They got in. If anyone finds this, do not trust the building. Tell Naomi I didn't leave." It wasn't typed. It wasn't printed. It was handwritten, with letters slanted and hurried as if scrawled under pressure. The ink had faded but was still legible. Mia stared at it for several seconds before reading it again, out loud. Jay asked who Naomi was. She didn't know. They called the landlord, who shrugged it off, said it was probably an old tenant being dramatic. But Mia wasn't so sure. She posted a picture of the note in a local forum, asking if anyone recognized the handwriting or the name. The thread exploded. Within hours, someone connected the name Naomi to a missing persons case from 13 years earlier. Lena Marsh disappeared from the very same apartment. Others chimed in. Former tenants who remembered strange drafts, noises in the night, whispers behind the closet wall. One posted the old composite sketch of a man in a green coat. Another shared Ivy's drawings. The conversation quickly outgrew the thread and spilled into true crime subreddits, TikTok theories, and YouTube speculation. Then Naomi saw the photo. She'd been tagged in a comment by a stranger. When she opened it, her heart dropped. She recognized the handwriting instantly. It was Lena's. She'd seen it on birthday cards, journal pages, post-it notes stuck on their fridge. It was unmistakable. She contacted the poster, confirmed the location, and immediately reached out to authorities. Detective Peter Sloan had long since retired, but the case, File 04398L, was never far from his thoughts. When he heard about the note, he drove to the apartment the next day, badge or no badge. He held the paper in his hands, silent for several moments. The ink matched samples from Lena's journal. The paper stock matched what Lena used. The reference to Naomi. Personal, pointed, impossible to fake. More chilling was the timing. Forensic analysis estimated the note had been written between 2011 and 2012, within a year of her disappearance. That meant Lena had written it after she vanished, which meant she'd still been alive. For a while. Sloane had the cavity behind the closet wall examined. It wasn't part of the building's blueprints. An illegal modification. A hidden space. No one could say for sure. But the discovery opened more questions than it answered. Why didn't any past inspections catch this? Who sealed the panel? And what did Lena mean by, "they got in"? Theories reignited like wildfire. Some believed she'd been hiding in the building all along. Others thought she'd discovered something she wasn't supposed to. A few clung to the supernatural. But one thing was undeniable. Lena hadn't simply disappeared. She'd been trapped, or worse, silenced. And now, 13 years later, her voice had broken through the walls that tried to contain it. The building, once just another address in Brooklyn, had become something else entirely. A puzzle. A place with secrets buried in drywall, whispers sealed beneath paint, and a name that refused to be forgotten. And somewhere behind that false wall, Lena had tried to warn someone. The note changed everything. Once verified as authentic, the NYPD reopened Lena Marsh's case under a new classification: critical possible abduction, foul play suspected. The discovery ignited media interest again. For the first time in over a decade, Lena's face returned to headlines. Detective Peter Sloane was officially retired, but the precinct invited him to consult. He didn't hesitate. 13 years had passed, but he hadn't let it go. Not really. This time, though, something felt different. They had a voice, a timestamp, a clear cry for help. The first order of business was re-examining the building's history. The apartment complex had changed ownership multiple times over the years. Property records showed it was once part of a real estate portfolio owned by a man named Clifford Dressner, a low-profile developer with a long history of shady dealings. Dressner's name was never connected to violent crimes, but a closer look revealed disturbing patterns. In 3 other buildings owned by Dressner between 2008 and 2013, female tenants had also disappeared under suspicious circumstances. One case was ruled a suicide, though the body was never found. Another was labeled a runaway. A third was dismissed entirely due to lack of evidence. All were young women living alone, and all had complained of maintenance issues before vanishing. Sloane pressed further. He uncovered civil complaints filed by former tenants alleging illegal surveillance, hidden cameras inside air vents, tampered locks, unapproved inspections. None of the claims ever went to court. Settlements were issued quietly. The building where Lena lived. It had never been inspected thoroughly. No one ever dug into the infrastructure, until now. The NYPD brought in structural engineers to assess 5B and surrounding units. Using thermal imaging, they discovered inconsistencies behind several walls. What appeared to be solid brick was in places hollow. The closet wall where the note had been found led to a sealed cavity that had no apparent function. That cavity wasn't just a pocket of air. It connected to a disused service corridor, walled off decades earlier when the building was renovated. The tunnel ran vertically between several floors and extended down to the basement level. As this discovery unfolded, a name resurfaced: Larry Jenkins. The former superintendent, who'd abruptly resigned months before Lena vanished, had never been located for follow-up. A new search was launched. Sloane tracked down a forwarding address linked to a Florida P.O. box. But the trail went cold again. Then, in a stroke of luck, an anonymous tip came in. The caller, voice disguised, claimed they used to live in the building and remembered something from 2011. There was screaming. Late at night. I didn't say anything back then. I was scared. The voice trembled. The caller said it happened on a Friday night in early March. They'd heard it clearly, muffled but panicked, coming from behind the bedroom wall of apartment 5B. It lasted maybe 30 seconds, then silence. The next morning, everything seemed normal. It matched the night Lena vanished. Though the tip couldn't be independently verified, it added weight to the theory that Lena hadn't simply walked away. She had been taken or trapped somewhere close, somewhere inside the building itself. Investigators began comparing tenant records across all of Dresdner's former properties. Patterns emerged: units with overlapping construction layouts, unexplained architectural gaps, lost building permits. What started as a missing persons case was beginning to look like something far larger. Meanwhile, forensic specialists returned to 5B. With permission from the current tenants, they dismantled the closet entirely. Behind the old plaster was evidence of patchwork not consistent with the original construction. Metal brackets, extra nails, uneven beams. Someone had modified the space, intentionally. And at the base of the cavity, partially embedded in dust, they found a key. Small, rusted, with the initials LM etched faintly into its side. It didn't match any known locks in the apartment. It wasn't part of the original building design. But it was real. It was hers. And it wasn't the last thing they'd find. The discovery of the key marked a turning point. With it came a new level of urgency. The NYPD brought in a forensic architecture team to analyze the building's original blueprints and compare them to current scans. What they found confirmed Sloane's long-standing suspicion. A hidden network had been built into the structure: passages, crawl spaces, and sealed corridors that weren't on any modern plans. The vertical cavity behind Lena's closet connected to one of these tunnels. Originally constructed in the 1920s as part of a now obsolete dumbwaiter and service access system, the tunnels had been closed off during renovations in the late 80s, or so the records claimed. In reality, at least 2 shafts remained accessible through retrofitted panels, one of them directly behind the back wall of apartment 5B. A warrant was issued to break open the sealed section of the service tunnel. It took hours to gain access. When they finally cracked through, the air that escaped was stale and dense, laced with decay. The tunnel was narrow, less than 3 feet wide, running behind a row of apartments like a hidden artery. It sloped downward toward the basement, with old wiring and rusted pipes threading the ceiling like veins. The walls were scrawled with markings, not graffiti, notes, dates, arrows, words like silence, stay low, no voices. At the far end, investigators found a crude wooden door wedged into the passage. It bore no knob, only a keyhole. They used Lena's key. The lock clicked. Inside was a bunker-like room, roughly 8 by 10 feet. No windows, concrete floor. A single bare bulb hung from a dangling wire. The smell was stronger here. Stale sweat, old metal, mold. The space looked like it hadn't been touched in years, yet certain elements felt disturbingly fresh. A stained mattress lay on the floor, flattened and torn. A metal folding chair sat in the corner. On a crate beside it, a collection of items: a rusted flashlight, an empty water bottle, and a pair of wire-rimmed glasses. Beside them, a leather-bound journal, too degraded to read fully, but with one legible word scratched on the inside cover: Lena. On the wall, faint streaks of red. Dried blood. Samples were taken immediately. No cameras. No signs of digital surveillance. But the setup wasn't random. It was deliberate. A place to hold someone, hide someone, or worse, forget someone. The room's only other feature was a small vent, too narrow for escape, but wide enough to carry sound. Investigators noted that the vent connected to a series of duct lines that passed behind 5B's bedroom. That detail echoed past accounts: whispers, ticking, the feeling of being watched. They hadn't been hallucinations. They were echoes from this room. DNA testing began on all materials: the blood on the wall, the hair on the mattress, the fibers caught in the vent filter. And still, questions multiplied. Who had built this room? Who had access to it? How long had it been used? Sloane returned to the old complaints from other buildings linked to Clifford Dresdner. Similar architecture, similar dead zones in floor plans. No coincidence. The team compiled a list of maintenance workers and subcontractors hired across Dresdner's portfolio. One name kept recurring: Larry Jenkins. It became clear the bunker hadn't just existed, it had been maintained. As news of the hidden room leaked, tenants from the building came forward with new claims. Air Plumber recalled being told never to touch certain access panels. A woman who lived in 4B years earlier remembered her dog barking uncontrollably at the bedroom vent for weeks. A man from 6A claimed to have found strange fingerprints inside his utility closet, but was told by management not to worry. Each new testimony pointed to a chilling reality. This space had always been close, always present, just out of reach. And now, with Lena's key unlocking the past, the walls themselves were starting to speak. The sketch had sat in Sloane's drawer for over a decade. A tall man, thin face, dark hair, heavy green coat worn and oversized, like it belonged to someone else. 3 separate witnesses described him loitering near the apartment building in the weeks before Lena disappeared. His posture was always the same, still, rigid, head tilted slightly down, eyes fixed on the 5th floor. He never spoke, never knocked, never entered. At the time, police dismissed the sightings as unrelated. There was no footage, no identification. Just vague descriptions that couldn't be confirmed. But now, with everything resurfacing, Sloane took another look. He brought the sketch to a facial recognition analyst and asked them to scan databases, state, federal, even international. Nothing matched. The man in the green coat was a ghost, until someone posted the sketch on a cold case forum. That changed everything. Within 2 days, a user from Baltimore commented. She recognized the face, said she'd seen a man exactly like him in 2009, outside her apartment building, watching her window for 3 nights in a row. She filed a report back then. Police didn't take it seriously. Another user chimed in. Milwaukee 2012. Same man, same coat. Standing across the street from an apartment complex where a woman had disappeared. Her name was Caitlin Reyes, 26 years old, lived alone, case still unsolved. A third report came from Denver. A college student named Jody Miara had taken a blurry photo of a man she said had followed her home. She posted it at the time, but no one identified him. When the photo resurfaced, the resemblance was undeniable. The same facial structure, same coat, same stillness. There was a pattern. Women in their 20s, living alone, all reported seeing the same man in the days or weeks before vanishing. In each case, no forced entry, no definitive evidence of foul play. Just disappearances that left no trace, and one quiet observer who never came close but never looked away. Sloane contacted every department tied to the old cases. Some cooperated, others resisted, citing resources or closed files, but the momentum was building. A cross-jurisdictional task force began to take shape. In Lena's case, the connection deepened. One tenant from the floor below, Mr. Pennington, came forward. He recalled seeing a man in a green coat inside the building months before Lena vanished. It was brief, a flash of movement on the staircase. He assumed it was a delivery worker or a guest. But now, he wasn't so sure. Another neighbor reported hearing the front door buzz late at night more than once. When she looked through the peephole, no one was there. But once she glimpsed a figure at the end of the hall. Green coat, standing still. What haunted the investigators most was this: the man was never caught on tape. Not in Brooklyn, not in Baltimore, not in Milwaukee or Denver. In each case, footage failed, blacked out, missing, or conveniently corrupted, as if someone knew exactly how to stay invisible. Then came a breakthrough. A woman in Albany, New York, recognized the sketch while watching a news segment. Her name was Anna Ruiz. She swore she'd seen the man outside her building in 2010. She never filed a report, but her daughter remembered it clearly, how Anna refused to leave the apartment for days afterward. More importantly, Anna kept a notebook. She'd written down the date, the weather, and what the man had been doing. Standing across the street watching, 2 hours, never moved. That date, March 3rd, 2010. Exactly 1 year before Lena vanished, the sightings weren't random. They were calculated, methodical. A circuit. Each woman was part of a sequence, observed, selected, silenced. And Lena may have been the first to notice it. What if she wasn't just a victim? What if she figured something out about the man, the building, the system? What if her note wasn't just a warning, but a key to unraveling a network that had hidden in plain sight for years. That question lingered in the air like smoke, and the closer investigators got to the truth, the more it seemed Lena's story wasn't just about what happened to her. It was about what she discovered. While investigators focused on architecture and missing persons reports, another unexpected lead emerged from an unlikely source. A man named Evan Carlton, an estate sale enthusiast and collector of vintage journals, posted a photo online of a leather-bound book he'd purchased years ago at a sidewalk sale in Brooklyn. The photo showed a familiar detail, an embossed pattern on the cover that matched the journal Lena had carried everywhere. Within hours, Naomi was contacted. She confirmed it. That was Lena's journal. Evan had bought it in 2013 from a table full of second-hand goods outside a thrift store near Clinton Hill. The seller was a middle-aged man who claimed to have cleaned out a storage unit. Evan didn't think twice at the time. He collected journals for the handwriting, often flipping through them for fragments of poetry or thought. But this one had disturbed him. He never read it fully, said the writing felt paranoid, even infected. He kept it in a box, untouched, until the case resurfaced. Now he handed it over to authorities. The journal was intact. The leather was worn, the spine cracked, but the pages, dozens of them, were filled with Lena's unmistakable handwriting. The entries began in late 2010 and ended just weeks before she vanished. The early pages were benign: daily routines, design notes, book titles. Gradually, a shift emerged. Lena described hearing things, scratches in the walls, the sound of whispering vents. She wrote about feeling watched, not just in the hallway, but in her own home. At first, she questioned herself. Maybe I'm too isolated, one entry read. Maybe I'm imagining things. But by December 2010, her tone changed. Her entries became shorter, sharper. The man is real. I've seen him twice now. Green coat. Always across the street. Never moves. I think someone has keys to my unit. I found my chair moved this morning. I never leave it like that. There's a space behind the closet. I can hear breathing. In January 2011, her journal took a chilling turn. She began documenting a code system. Symbols she drew along the page margins, correlating to times of night and specific noises. She mentioned metal clicking, a soft knock inside the wall, and whispers in a language I can't place. Something is behind there, not rats, not plumbing. It's listening, learning. She referred to the Watcher multiple times, not always in fear, sometimes with a strange detachment. I think he waits for silence, that's when he comes. On February 14th, she wrote, they tried the door again. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I think they thought I was gone. On February 21st, I won't leave until I finish this. There's something wrong in this building. I can feel it under the floor. Her final entry was dated March 3rd, 2011, one day before she disappeared. I know how to warn them. If I'm right, they'll never find me. But if I'm wrong, tell Naomi I didn't leave. I promise I didn't leave. That line matched the wording in the note found behind the closet. It was the same hand, same fear, same certainty. The journal wasn't just a record. It was a timeline, a descent into suspicion, fear, and ultimately, revelation. Lena hadn't been unraveling. She had been documenting something she couldn't fully explain, something she was certain would be ignored if spoken aloud. And she was right. Until now. Forensic analysts examined the journal for external traces. The paper edges showed signs of exposure to mold spores specific to the hidden bunker. The last few pages contained faint smudges of soot and microscopic fibers matching the mattress found underground. Lena had likely taken the journal with her into the passage. How it ended up in a sidewalk sale remained unclear. Perhaps someone found it during a quiet, undocumented search. Perhaps they knew exactly what it was and sold it anyway, but its contents were clear. Lena knew she was being hunted. She knew the building hid secrets no one else wanted to see. And even as fear took hold, she found the strength to document every sign, every sound, every shadow. And now, with her words finally heard, the picture was no longer just tragic. It was terrifyingly deliberate. Just when the case seemed saturated with fragments, notes, tunnels, symbols, sightings, something entirely new emerged. A voice. A woman named Claudia Vega called the NYPD tip line. Her tone was steady, almost too calm. She said she'd seen the news about Lena Marsh and recognized the building immediately, not from pictures, from memory. "I lived there once," she said. "But I left without telling anyone. I didn't want to end up like her." Claudia had lived in the same building, apartment 3D, from late 2007 to early 2009. She was a nursing student then, 24, working nights and studying during the day. She described herself as introverted, low profile, just like Lena, and like Lena she had experienced strange things. The first time was during finals week. She heard a soft tapping in her wall, slow, rhythmic. Then came the knocking, gentle but deliberate, not from the hallway, from inside the structure itself. She dismissed it as plumbing, until the whispers began. At first, they were faint, too soft to make out. But they came regularly, always around 3 a.m., and always from the same place, the air vent beside her bed. She contacted the building manager, who brushed it off. "Old buildings make noise," he said. Then she started waking up to find small things moved. Her coffee cup on the wrong shelf, her bathroom light on, her towel, wet when it shouldn't be. She thought she was losing her mind. One night she stayed up and watched the hallway through the peephole. Nothing. But when she returned to her bedroom, her closet door was ajar. She hadn't touched it. That was the moment she packed a bag and left. She didn't file a police report. She didn't even break her lease properly. She disappeared from the lease registry, vanished into another borough, changed her phone number. "I always told myself it was paranoia," she told the detective. "But when I saw Lena's handwriting on the news, I remembered the symbols. I'd seen them, on the inside of my closet wall." Claudia agreed to come in for questioning. She brought a journal of her own, not as detailed as Lena's, but filled with notes, times, sounds. What stood out most were her descriptions of voices, one of which she claimed began calling her by name. That detail sent a chill through the room. She also remembered a man, though she never saw his face. She once spotted a figure at the bottom of the stairwell, standing still, looking up. Green coat. When she blinked, he was gone. But Claudia had something else, something no one expected. A name. She mentioned that once, while taking out trash late at night, she passed two men in the basement hallway. One of them she recognized as Larry Jenkins, the superintendent at the time. The other she didn't know. He wore a dark shirt, grey slacks, and carried a tool bag. Jenkins called him Randy. I remember it because Jenkins said, "Randy, don't forget the back latch this time. We're not fixing drywall again." That moment, overheard and dismissed at the time, now held significance. Investigators dug into subcontractor lists. They found a Randall King, carpenter, freelance, never licensed, who'd worked on several of Clifford Dresner's properties, including Lena's building. He had no criminal record, no known address. But his name showed up on a receipt for supplies used during a utility repair, logged 1 month before Lena disappeared. With this, the NYPD obtained a warrant. The next morning, they raided a storage facility in Red Hook, rented under King's alias. Inside, they found tools, blueprints, and dozens of labeled folders, some containing floor plans with markings. Others held personal information, names, ages, photos. Lena's folder was there. So was Claudia's. Both contained not only building details but hand-drawn schematics of apartment layouts and notes about habits, when they were home, when they were alone, what time they usually slept. It wasn't just surveillance, it was stalking, calculated long-term, and if Claudia hadn't come forward, they might never have connected the final link. For the first time, someone who had lived through the nightmare stood in front of investigators, breathing solid, undeniable, a living witness. The arrest came swiftly. On a grey morning in early May, Randall King was found at a job site in Long Island. He didn't resist. He barely spoke. When asked if he knew why he was being arrested, he only said, "Took you long enough." Inside the interrogation room, he said little more. His lawyer advised him to stay silent And he did. But he didn't deny the charges. Not once. The evidence spoke for him. The storage unit had yielded far more than floor plans. Investigators found time-stamped notebooks, detailed tracking logs and receipts for soundproofing materials. There were photographs, some dating back over a decade, taken from rooftops, alleyways and through windows. Women, always alone, unaware, targeted. But it didn't stop with King. Under pressure and growing public outrage, the task force dug deeper into the paper trail. They uncovered financial connections between King and a company owned by Clifford Dresner's son, Andrew. Payments disguised as consulting fees, deposits made through shell accounts. And more telling, a shared storage lease signed by Jenkins, the former superintendent, and Andrew Dresner himself. Warrants followed. Jenkins was arrested at a trailer park outside Tampa, Florida. He confessed almost immediately. His hands shook during the booking. He claimed he didn't know what they were doing with the girls, only that he was paid to keep certain doors unlocked. Andrew Dresner was harder to pin. But a whistleblower inside his real estate firm provided internal memos, contracts with falsified construction permits, unlicensed surveillance equipment orders, and instructions for non-intrusive tenant tracking. It was enough. On June 12, 2024, all three men were charged with conspiracy, unlawful imprisonment, obstruction of justice, and multiple counts of aiding and abetting in the disappearances of at least 5 women, Lena Marsh among them. They called it the Silence Network. The press devoured the story. Opinion columns exploded, podcasts dissected timelines. True crime channels flooded the internet. But through the noise, one truth held still. Lena had been right. Every note, every whisper, every instinct. She hadn't been paranoid. She had been hunted. Forensic labs confirmed the blood in the hidden bunker matched Lena's DNA. So did several hairs pulled from the mattress. The glasses found on the crate. Prescription lenses identical to hers. Though her body was never recovered, the district attorney declared Lena legally deceased, the result of homicide. For Naomi, it was a strange kind of closure. Not relief, not peace, but truth. At last. She released a statement to the press. Lena was always more perceptive than people gave her credit for. She noticed what others ignored. She felt what others dismissed. She was brave. Braver than I ever knew, and I hope the world finally sees that. Detective Sloan, now fully re-engaged as an official consultant, was asked if he felt vindicated. He answered simply, "I feel angry because we didn't listen soon enough." Public demand for accountability mounted. Investigations were launched into building safety codes, tenant protection loopholes, and the NYPD's past mishandlings of missing persons cases. For a time, silence was no longer an option. And in Brooklyn, at the apartment on Myrtle Avenue, something remarkable happened. Tenants gathered. They installed a plaque outside Unit 5B, etched in brushed steel, with Lena's name and a quote from her final journal entry. "If I'm not back by tomorrow, it's already too late." It became a vigil site. Flowers, candles, and sketches lined the hallway wall. For many it was a symbol, not of fear but of defiance, that a single voice ignored for years had finally broken through. And as for the building, it was sold to a non-profit housing group within months. Renovations were made, hidden walls were demolished, tunnels sealed. The closet was rebuilt with glass panels, nothing to hide. Lena's story didn't just expose a crime. It dismantled a system designed to keep people silent, and though justice came late, it came loud. The silence was broken. The courtroom was full when the verdicts were read. Reporters packed the benches, cameras waited outside. But Naomi Marsh sat still, alone in the third row, hands folded in her lap. When the final count of guilty was announced, she didn't cry. She didn't smile. She only closed her eyes for a long moment, then opened them, as if finally ready to breathe again. Closure is a complicated word. For 13 years, Naomi had lived between hope and grief. She'd believed Lena might still be alive. She'd imagined her escaping, hiding, surviving somewhere. But she'd also known the odds, known that every quiet day was a louder reminder of absence. Now there was no more doubt. She met with detectives one final time, asked every question she had. They showed her the bunker, the journal, the key. She visited apartment 5B, stood in the closet, touched the wall that had hidden her sister's final words. And then she did something unexpected. She asked for Lena's cat. Marble had been passed between foster homes after Naomi could no longer keep her. But she tracked the cat down, now frail with cloudy eyes but still alive. Naomi adopted her again, saying it was something small she could still give back. "It feels like finishing a sentence," she told a journalist later. "Not a happy one, but one that deserves a period, not an ellipsis." She returned to the family home in Philadelphia for a while, brought out old photo albums, watched videos of them as kids, Lena always quiet, always watching. She remembered how Lena would narrate stories for her stuffed animals, creating whole worlds with tiny voices, how she once taped pictures to the inside of her closet so she could dream into them. The final story Lena told, the one about being followed, hunted, hidden, had taken longer to believe. But now it had been heard. The community didn't forget either. The local artist painted a mural on the side of a building near the apartment. It showed a woman with long dark hair, standing in profile, half her face hidden in shadow, half in light. Around her, fragmented walls breaking open with tiny paper notes floating upward like birds. Below it, a caption read, "She told the truth, we just didn't listen." The plaque outside 5B became a place of pilgrimage. Survivors left letters. Strangers brought candles. Teachers used her story in lectures about intuition, warning signs, the importance of being believed. But perhaps the most unexpected tribute came from Detective Sloan. He retired for the second time, this time permanently. At his farewell, he gave a short speech, no fanfare, no medals. Just a photograph of Lena, framed in simple black wood, which he placed on the precinct wall beside the missing persons board. "She taught me not to trust silence," he said. "I hope we all remember that." Naomi began writing a memoir, not just about Lena's disappearance, but about their childhood, their bond, the slow grief of unanswered questions. She titled it, Inside the Wall. Early drafts moved publishers to tears. The book was scheduled for release the following year, and though she never got to say goodbye properly, Naomi found moments of connection. In the journal, in the whispers from old neighbors, in Claudia's voice, in the thousands of strangers who sent her messages, she found Lena again. Not just as a victim, but as a sister. A fighter, a woman who refused to disappear quietly. For all the horror, there was something else left behind. Strength, not just Lena's, but Naomi's, Claudia's, the community's, a collective refusal to let darkness have the last word. And so, while justice may have been late and closure incomplete, what emerged from the ruins of that story wasn't despair. It was something far more enduring. It was memory, carried forward, not as pain but as purpose. Months after the convictions, just as the case began to settle into history, something new surfaced, something that reopened the question everyone thought had finally been answered. It began with a second note. During a full renovation of the building, engineers were instructed to strip all walls connected to the old utility tunnels. They wanted to eliminate every trace of the hidden spaces once used by King and his collaborators. In one such corridor, behind a crumbling access panel wedged between floors 3 and 4, a maintenance worker found it, folded, yellowed, stuffed behind a metal pipe. The handwriting was different, smaller, shakier, but the message was unmistakably deliberate. She tried to help me. "Please tell them her name was Lena. My name is Anya. I'm still here." The discovery halted demolition. Investigators returned immediately. The note was authenticated within days, aged approximately 12 years. Analysis suggested it had been written in early 2012. Within the time frame, Lena was believed to still be alive. But no one named Anya had been listed among tenants, guests, or workers at the building. No missing persons case matched the name in that area. At first, detectives assumed it might be a hoax, a morbid fabrication. But when they returned to the old files, one detail stood out. Lena's final journal entry had included an unusual phrase scribbled in the bottom margin. "She's younger. I think they moved her. No name yet." At the time, it was dismissed as incoherent. Now it felt like context. Investigators expanded the search. They traced every work order under Jenkins' supervision during the relevant years. One permit led them to a nearby building, less than 3 blocks away, also once owned by Dresner. It had the same architecture, same hidden duct system, same design anomalies. The FBI requested a full structural scan. Behind a rear wall in the basement, they found what appeared to be a sealed chamber, smaller than the one behind 5B, but similar in build. Breaking through revealed a concrete shell, empty except for a thin mattress, a rusted metal bucket, and faint etchings on the inside wall. A. The letters repeated in long lines. DNA tests on hair and fibers in the space revealed they did not match Lena, but they did indicate another young woman had been held there. Her profile was consistent with someone in their late teens to early 20s. Her identity, however, remained unknown. A search began. Flyers were distributed. Tips came in. One woman believed the note belonged to her cousin, who vanished during a visit to New York in 2011. Another claimed she'd heard rumors of girls disappearing through basements in the early 2000s. But none of the leads confirmed Anya's existence. The most compelling clue came from an old city housing inspector, now retired. He recalled visiting the Myrtle Avenue building in 2012 and being denied entry to the lower mechanical rooms. The excuse: leak containment. He filed a complaint, but it was buried under administrative backlogs. When shown the note, he whispered, "They weren't hiding water." The team realized that Lena hadn't just been trying to escape. She had tried to save someone else. She'd written her final note not out of panic, but purpose. She was leaving a message not just for Naomi, but for anyone who might still be listening. The thought changed everything. If there was an Anya, she might not have made it. But she might not have been alone. The network, after all, had spanned multiple properties. The folder in King's storage unit listed at least 12 names. Only 5 had been linked to known disappearances. Who were the others? Where were they now? What if some were still out there? The story that once seemed contained to one building, one woman, one night, was no longer just Lena's. It was part of a larger, darker thread. And despite the convictions, it wasn't over. It was far from over. Lena Marsh's story began in silence, and for years it stayed there. A woman vanished behind a locked door, leaving no footprints, no explanation, no goodbye. But she left something stronger. She left a note. She left a journal. She left truth buried behind drywall, tucked inside false walls, whispered through vents etched in fragments only the persistent could hear. And because of that, because she refused to disappear without evidence, her story changed everything. Lena didn't just uncover a crime. She became the reason it was exposed. Not with confrontation or force, but with precision, with documentation, with quiet courage in the face of something calculated to consume her. She was not the only victim, but she was the one who left a map. Her words pierced through time and disbelief. Her final act was not to run, but to record, not to surrender, but to leave a trail. And in doing so, she gave others a chance. Claudia Vega, the unidentified Anya, perhaps others still unnamed. Each of them now carries a thread of her resilience. What began as a missing persons case ended in a systemic unraveling, a hidden network dismantled, its architects behind bars. But more than that, it forced a reckoning, with institutions that failed to listen, with systems that ignored red flags, with the dangerous assumption that silence meant safety. It didn't. The silence was the danger, and Lena knew that. She lived quietly, but she disappeared loudly. Her echo reverberated across neighborhoods, states, even years. A simple note, 16 words, disrupted everything. They got in. "If anyone finds this, do not trust the building. Tell Naomi I didn't leave." That message, scrawled in haste, became a manifesto. And it worked. Justice, delayed as it was, came. Naomi found answers. Sloan found redemption. Survivors found connection, and society, if even slightly, was reminded of how important it is to pay attention to the quiet ones, the patterns, the people who notice. Because hidden horrors rarely shout, they whisper. They slip through bureaucracy. They hide behind concrete and protocol. They trust no one will believe the girl who says, "I hear breathing in the wall." But Lena believed herself. And now, so do we. If you followed this story to the end, thank you. These stories matter. They remind us of the weight of vigilance, the necessity of belief, and the courage it takes to speak, even when no one is listening. So before you go, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue bringing forward real stories like this, stories that challenge what we think we know, that honor the victims and push for justice. Don't let their voices fade. And if this story moved you, if it made you pause, wonder, or even whisper Lena's name, there's more we want to share. Click the video on your screen now to uncover another haunting mystery. The case of the woman who vanished inside a hotel elevator, leaving behind footage that still defies explanation. Because some stories don't end. They unfold.